taxation practice. There are various remittances which go in and out of India with respect to the database services, with respect to the services which are given to any, software company for, using some of the, for using some of their software portal. It's a technologically driven environment. And for this is one of the important and interesting case laws which will help us in the day-to-day practice as well. Salesforce Pte Limited, Singapore-based company. Let me share my screen and then we'll deliberate on the case law. Is it visible to all?
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So, like, it's a case law on the treatment of the subscription fees, which is received by the Salesforce Singapore from the Indian customers or from the Indian entities. So the entire, the fact is illustrated in this diagram, wherein the flow of the payment or the consideration is from India to Singapore. For what? For using their CRM software portal, so that the Indian customer can actually enable itself to systematically generate the report by putting the data or by, feeding in the data which belongs to the Indian customer only. It is not the data of any third party, or it is not the data which is collated or gathered by the Salesforce. It is primarily the Indian customer's data. It inputs the data, gets access to the CRM software portal, which is owned by the Salesforce, and gets the business data reports, or the information reports, or, the analytic reports on the marketing campaigns, which the Indian entity runs, tracking leads, and so on and so forth. And the consideration is accordingly paid. So let's understand the flow, what the CRM portal actually is. It is a comprehensive customer relationship management portal, which is owned, developed, and created by the Singapore entity in our case. So in which, simply put, there is a lot of technology involved in the backend, no doubt about it. And that's what the major contention of the department and the revenue was, as well. And it was a very right contention of everyone for that matter, because CRM is a result of a programming, coding, languages. A lot of professionals who have specialized knowledge in this space can create this kind of a software portal, which can actually help the Indian customers or the Indian entities to get the reports in the manner as they desire it to be. So a simple diagram on the CRM application software portal: data is input by the customer, and then it gets feed into the system backend of the CRM, and then the data is retrieved in the desired format, which is asked by the Indian customer. Coming back on the issue once again, it was the subscription fees received from the Indian customers, whether it should be taxable under Section 115A of the Domestic Tax Law of India, Income Tax Act, at the rate of 10% in royalty, by making it chargeable under Section 91 VI, or under Article 12 of the India-Singapore Treaty at the rate of flat 10%. Arguments by the revenue were valid on their, on the infrastructure of the CRM. I would say that was my understanding after reading this case law, because revenue contended that whatever the Indian customer is actually getting is a result of a web service, is a result of a highly technical driven solution which is created and developed by the Salesforce. It is not a simple infrastructure being put by the Salesforce. It is highly technical, and the Indian customer is getting the right to use that equipment, or to getting the right to use that intellectual properties or the know-how or the system which is created by the Salesforce. Though the ownership was nowhere disputed in the said case law, further contentions was all of the contentions revolve around the technologically enabled solutions. So according to them, it's a process. It's a process wherein the first step is the cloud computing service or the CRM software portal is set up. And the second process is the client, Indian customer, is able to enjoy the process, able to use the process and get the data in the desired format. This is so complex level, high technology involved in this, and the customer is the ultimate beneficiary. Indian customer is the ultimate beneficiary. He is able to get the report generating out of such a complex, highly driven technology, based CRM portal. Then before arriving at the characterization of whether this payment should fall under 91 VI or not, one of the main go-to documents is the master subscription agreement, wherein the different clauses states what means what, customer data means what are the rights involved of the both the parties, what are the rights when it really comes to the protection, what are the usage restrictions, what is the number of days that the Salesforce has to provide the data with, or what is the maximum number of days the Salesforce has to keep the data with itself, or to get away with the data, how the rights are going to be preserved, what is the nature of the license that is granted, what is the nature of the subscription that is granted to the Indian customers or the employees of the Indian customers, what is the information and what are the rights of the ownership on that information, who is going to own the intellectual property in the entire. So these are all the extracts from the master service agreements of the master of which has been entered into with the Salesforce and the Indian customer. Summing up the entire master subscription agreement, it could be inferred that it was not a use of intellectual property which is owned and created by the Salesforce. First of all, it was just an access which was granted to the Indian customer. Just an access which was granted to the Indian customer on the payment of a subscription fee, wherein nothing else is happening. Access is granted, Indian customer is putting its own data and getting the desired report. There was no right of commercial exploitation. The data which has been obtained by the Indian customer can be used by the Indian customer only. Customer's own data is put. Salesforce has no right on the data to keep the data in itself. No right was conferred on the Salesforce on the client's data. Salesforce owns all the right, title, interest in the IPR and the technology. These are quite simple things which is actually leading to one inference that this cannot form royalty. But no, let us not arrive at the conclusion straight away. There are other twists and turns as well, which are known as the distinguishing factors in every ruling. No right or license is granted to use any logo. Fine. Customers have no right to access the process. So there is no control on the entire infrastructure, on the entire equipment which is designed and created by the Salesforce, by the Indian customers. Okay, great. Now, what should be the other contentions of the revenue? It doesn't seem so easy to take the payment out of the royalty ambit, wherein at the first place or at prima facie it feels that it should come under the royalty because it's a result of a highly technically complicated driven technology based solution, which will ultimately benefit the Indian customer, which will ultimately be the source of the revenue or the source of income for the Indian customer. As per the UN commentary or as per the OECD commentary, if we see the information and how can it actually be brought to the tax, the term information is that the first criteria, it should result in the income for the recipient. Any information that you have received, it should result in your income. It should give you a direct benefit. Anyways, the interesting contentions of the revenue were in this, that basically the Salesforce Singapore entity is imparting information or a technical experience which results into a commercial expediency for the Indian customer at the end of the day. And that is why it should come under the royalty. Further, equipment is not under the control of the Indian customer as per the agreement, and factually also, because the data which was put in the CRM software ultimately gets stored on the server, and the location of the server or the situs of the server is important to determine the taxability. and the server is located outside India. There is no dispute on that. So two main points is whether if the equipment is not under the control of the Indian customer, okay, fine, it is not the royalty. But is it imparting a technical or commercial scientific experience by imparting information by the sales force to the Indian customer? If yes, then it's a royalty. If no, then it's not a royalty. Let's see. Coming to section 91 VI under the domestic tax law of India, there are several limbs under explanation 2 which defines royalty. Is like royalty means is a very important word to see here. Royalty means consideration for. Coming to the applicable limbs of this transaction is highlighted in bold, the imparting of any information, or another point, the use of process, or another point is imparting of any information concerning technically or scientific knowledge or experience. Experience is a very interesting word in this whole case law. Or the use of the right to use any industrial, commercial, or scientific equipment, but not including the amounts referred to in 44BB. Fine. Coming to the article now, if it falls under 91 VI, then what the non-resident or a foreign company after that does, it goes to the treaty to basically get the treaty benefit which is conferred upon by the section 90 of the Indian Income Tax Act. It goes to the treaty. For example, a sales force thinks that it may fall under 91 VI. I'm not coming to a conclusion straight away. It will go to the Article 12 of the treaty because of the empowering section 90, which is given to the non-resident. The term royalties under Article 12 simply taxes the payment at 10%, wherein the royalty means a right to use a process or for information concerning industrial, commercial, or scientific experience. Again, identical words: industrial, commercial, scientific experience, process. These are all the relevant words for this particular case law. And how the interplay is going to happen, we are going to come in another 5 minutes. Point B, any industrial, commercial, scientific equipment consideration for the right to use of these equipments will fall under the royalty as per Article 12. That's what the plain reading actually implies towards. Coming to the decision of the Honorable Tribunal, because this is a tribunal ruling, assessing officer and CIT appeals held that this should fall under the royalty because it is imparting a technical, commercial, scientific experience to the Indian customer. Even though the equipment is not under the control, even though the Indian customer does not have access to the methodologies of the evolving databases which is happening at the back end of the CRM software portal. Tribunal, very interesting. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Tribunal very interestingly appreciated the concept that it is a web access. No doubt, it is an access given on the internet. Internet is important to actually get the real-time reports. That is all fine. But whether it will qualify under royalty, we have to satisfy the imparting of information technological experience element in this entire transaction. There was one ruling of ThoughtBuzz, which is an advanced ruling which was relied upon by the revenue. ThoughtBuzz was a company which used to gather the data from all the third-party sources or the data which was already in the public domain. ThoughtBuzz didn't used to get the data from the client itself. Whereas in the Salesforce case law, it is my own data. It is the Indian customer's own data which is getting fed into the system. The revenue relied on AAR of ThoughtBuzz Limited, wherein it was held that these payments are going to be characterized as royalty and held taxable under a 91 VI or treaty, whichever is more beneficial. Accordingly, there were several other rulings as well, which was against the revenue and in the favor of the assessee consequently, wherein it was held that just because an access is granted, this does not mean a technical experience has been granted. For example, I go and buy a book I do not, I can buy a book. It's a simple sale of a book by the bookseller to me, but the copyright of that book remains with the author. Similarly, in this case, ownership of the entire CRM, ownership of the entire architecture, the control of the equipment, control of the architecture is with the Salesforce. Point number one, not disputed. Coming to the technical experience, if the report which is getting generated gets fallen under technical experience, then it is actually, it would be quite absurd, because the report which the person is getting at the end of the day is his own number, is his own entire statistics, which is just getting organized in a desired format, nothing else. No other value addition has been put in by the Salesforce which can help the client in analyzing the business data better. Had it been the case, this would have been covered under the royalty, but this was not the case in this ruling in hand. Further, there was no data centers in India. Servers were all located in India, so it will not be held under the article. It cannot be held taxable under the Article 7 also, since no profits, since there is no PE first, and no PE, then no taxability arises for the business profits. And no place of management, similarly going to the Article 7 immunity. Technical experience was elaborated much more in the supporting rulings in this particular case by the American Chemical Society and Dun and Bradstreet. There are cases which were cited in this ruling wherein it was categorically appreciated that Salesforce in this case is creating or maintaining the database. It is actually just processing your database. It is not doing anything else apart from these two activities. And the ultimate ownership of the data is with the client as per the master subscription agreement. It is not of the Salesforce. It is just maintaining the creating and maintaining and processing the data and transmitting it back to you in your desired format, and that too is not in the format which the Salesforce wants you to deliver. In the your format only, you're getting everything. You're feeding and you're getting what your own data in a desired format. That's it. There is no there was no sale of the IP which is owned by the Salesforce to the Indian customers. Hence, it should not get covered under the royalty. And further, in the case of American Chemicals, which was mentioned in this ruling, and Dun and Bradstreet, coming to the technical experience, it was very beautifully put. It is very beautifully put in that suppose a professor or a highly technical person is teaching someone, or is telling someone how to do something in this way, that that statement by the, or that way of teaching it to someone how to do particular thing, is a basis of the experience which that person has. That person cannot transfer his experience to you. In the case of American Chemical, what were the facts is that there was a portal which used to circulate all the research papers prepared by the renowned scientists from all over the world, and the American Chemical Society used to charge for that, and the consideration which the society used to charge could not get covered under the royalty, because this is not the experience which the American society was imparting to the public at large. This was the experience of the scientists which were getting imparted, and not of the American society. And similar analogy, if drawn to the Salesforce case, it is not imparting any technical experience. It is not imparting any knowledge of the methodology which they have actually employed to form or create their CRM databases. They are not imparting any information. They're not imparting any technical experience. They're not imparting any scientific experience to the client. It is just a normal information report, or a business data report, or a or any analytical report which will help the client the way and that would be helped only to the Indian customer only, not anyone else. It is, the report varies from person to person. So on all these lines, it was held that these services have an absent element of what? Imparting the information clearly, transfer of any knowledge clearly, or any experience or a skill. The person, for example, the engineer who has designed that CRM software portal has some empirical knowledge or a specialized knowledge. That knowledge is not getting passed on to the Indian customer at the end of the day. How can it be considered that a report, if the report has been generated, the entire IP or the entire methodologies or of concerning these databases have been transferred. No, it would be absurd to say that. So it was held on these grounds, on these reasons, that this payment is not to be treated as royalty, both as per the domestic tax law and the DTAA. So this was it. In the interest of time, this is the ruling which was there, and it's a very commonly used ruling in the day-to-day transactions, wherein we get lots of invoices, we get lots of remittances of the similar nature happening day in and day out. Thank you so very much once again.
Explained this case law very well, and he brought out those finer nuances so very nicely. There were, in fact, I was just looking up, there were 2 or 3 more cases. One again is of Mumbai bench, Elsevier Information Systems GmbH. So that also again laid down the same law that payment for online subscription services will not be taxed as royalty. And there was one from Delhi bench. Let me just see. In fact, there was one in this, they had also referred to the AAR in the case of Dun and Bradstreet Spena.
Yeah.
And
Spanish shop.
Then there was another order of the IT18 ITO versus Cedilla Healthcare Limited. So maybe these were the maybe you can say the precursors, and then but they have not discussed human intervention in this order, have they?
No.
No, they haven't.
They haven't, sir.
So where I think I don't know whether,
beautifully written order, very beautifully written order.
So I don't know whether Prakashji made a comment that because of some judgments this law has come. Prakashji, you would recall that it was the Supreme Court's judgment in the case of, I think, was it GSK or something, where they said on the domestic transfer pricing that there should be transfer pricing, and picking up from that, the government of India brought in transfer pricing legislation.
Yes, sir.
GlaxoSmithKline. Yeah. So I just think from memory, I think when you made that point, I think you'll find there are a lot of places where some observations, some comments, and the challenge, which I have seen is, I think it was late Justice Kapadia had made a point in one of the IT80 meetings which he was addressing. The difficulty, sir, is that he made a point that when you read the judgment, you read line by line and you start analyzing line by line, saying that the court in para 5 has said this, and para 7 has said this, and para 15 has said this. Then there are contradictions. And his point was that don't read line by line. I think he said, look at the ratio of the judgment. Because when you're writing a judgment, and sir, I'm sure you would probably have your thoughts to share on this, that when you're writing a judgment, you're not trying to see each line which is written. You're trying to look at what is the ratio coming out of the judgment and what is your final view on that matter. So I remember when the Morgan Stanley judgment came, it was, I think, more than 10 years back. It was analyzed by everyone, and everyone found fault with one line or the other. And I think which should not be the case. Look at the ratio, look at the principles, and the facts which are leading to a judgment. So I think the judgment has to be read in totality instead of reading a line and analyzing to, create contradictions and create issues where none exist.
I have very important point on the Bombay High Court in the case of L&T judgment here. Before I come to this point here, in my humble understanding of the judgment here, the conclusion is correct, but the reasoning is not correct, with my humility here. Why I am saying so, in this judgment, the emphasis has been done on the term in connection with. However, if we read the statute here, I am just reading the 44BB because I have done a lot of work on the 44BB. So I have just practically recall everything here. It says that notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in 28 to 41 and section 43 to 43A, comma, in the case of an SSE, comma, being a non-resident. So the SSE should be a non-resident. The first cursor is that. After that said, engaged in the business of providing services. So the SSE should be engaged in the business of providing the services. We will discuss the term services, qua the FTS and royalty is something different that will come here. Or facility in connection with. So the term in connection with is linked with the services or facility. Or supplying plant and machinery on hire, used or to be used. So the moment we'll come to the second limb, which talks about the plant and machinery, it says on hire, used or to be used. The term in connection with is not there. So the term in connection with is not qua the plant and machinery, but it is qua the services or the facility. First point is that here. So the term, when the court is taking the issue of the higher charges of the barge, which is trying to cover as a plant and machinery, so the term in connection with is something irrelevant here. They should discuss used or to be used here. The second point which is there here, if we compare the 916 limb here, which is very much pertaining to, and 916 and 917 is very much important for the purpose of understanding the 44 BB. 916 says, which C has raised the point here, for use or right to use any industrial, commercial or scientific equipment. It is the term which is equipment is there. The equipment can be commercial, scientific and industrial equipment, but not including the amount referred to in section 44 BB. When we come to the section 44 BB, it says that in the part 2, it is plant and machinery. It is not the equipment. And we come to the explanation. Explanation say plant includes ship, aircraft, vehicle, daily unit, scientific apparatus and equipment. So only qua the equipment, only the 916 is valid, not for the other limb of the plant and machinery that is valid here. For the purpose of the said business here. Now, another part is that is very much interesting part is there. If we come to the 917, which talks about the FTS. FTS has an exclusion clause. FTS is an exclusion clause. It says that for the purpose of this section, clause fee for technical services means the consideration, including any lump sum consideration for rendering any managerial, technical and consultancy services, including the provision of services of technical or other person, but does not include consideration for any construction. The moment you will say that construction is there, so the services can be in their construction. Construction will be go to the 44 triple B. Assembly is a different business itself. Mining. From here, the term mining, there is a Soli Sorabji opinion that the mining will include everything here. And 44 BB is qua the mining of the mineral oil, not the mining of the everything. So the mining is a very broad term, mining of the coal, mining of the bauxite, mining of the anything can be covered under the 91 exclusion clause of the 917. Whereas the 916 in 44 BB talks about the services which may be the FTS, but qua the prospecting and the exploration of mineral oil, which is especially used for the purpose of the prospecting, exploration and production of mineral oil, that will cover into the 44 BB. Another is important very much important point is that the 44 after 44 BB there was in between 44 D. Between 2003 to 2011, the 44 D was under the sunset clause. From 1/4/2011, the 44 DA came into the picture here, and all the services which are not connected with the prospecting mineral or prospecting of this ones can be covered under the 44 DA, which is a general section where if you have the P, and naturally you have the P, that can be covered there. And also there is a net basis of taxation. The 44 BB is also net basis of taxation. So just 2 points that I wanted to draw with the permission of Mridhu ma'am.
So Mridu, just one question to you. If you go to the chat box, there is a question put by Vijay Goyal. If you can just respond, and then we can go back again. So if you can just look at the chat, there's just before the end, where Yishu is thanking Aditi and each other. Just before that, there are two questions posted by Vijayji on your presentation. I think let's cover that first.
I can see use or right to use any commercial or scientific equipment and question mark there. And
prior to that, I think prior to that or just after that. There are two questions together by Vijay, Mr. Vijay Goyal.
I can see how come control has been denied. No, so I'm able to see one.
Or can we allow Vijay Goyal to speak on this part here and he can ask the question?
So the second question pertains to the next case law, Salesforce case law.
Okay, fine. So you can respond to your point and then.
So sure. So I'm just trying to figure out what the question actually is. It just says use or right to use any commercial or scientific equipment question mark. Okay. So what my understanding is that again, what Prakash sir also brought into play was that there could be an ambiguity that could come in here because the FTS clause very categorically takes out of or provides an exception for mining or like activities. Whereas under the provisions of royalty under the Act, there is no specific carve-out that has been provided to mining or extraction activities per se. It is only this particular subclause under the explanation 2, which and also again very particularly for the purpose of equipment, that there is a exception or there is a carve out. And in my opinion as well, that Supreme Court's judgment in the case of ONGC only spoke about FTS and services, because that particular case, all the agreements were only on account of certain services. There was nothing that was discussed on account of royalty. So given the interplay between 44BB and 44DA, even post the amendment that has come in 2011, which Sir has just spoken about, there could still be an issue where royalty, other than the equipment royalty, could still be a matter of litigation as to whether 44BB should apply or 44DA still, would be an applicability here.
Sorry, Mridu, sorry interrupting you. Those questions are more on Salesforce, and I think I probably wrongly looked at the question.
Yes.
And yeah.
That's
sorry, so you should please go ahead. You can respond and then you can turn.
Mr. Vijay is repeatedly saying, "This is for Yishu, please."
No, I saw that. I never would interrupt.
My apologies. I just went on. I didn't realize.
No,
please. It just widened my perspective somewhere. So no need for an apology. So Vijayji, thank you for your query. And if I go back to your question, you have two questions. One is on control, and you are saying that control is there on that part where the customer is able to upload the data and process the same, isn't it? Okay. And the second question is use or right to use any commercial or scientific equipment question mark. So let me cover the concept of control. The control word is nowhere defined. If we go in the Oxford dictionary and find the meaning of control, is you will directly link it with the influence. So if you're actually able to influence the system, or you're actually able to influence someone in your daily life, you can be said to have been controlling that person. So if in this case, coming straight to the Salesforce case, it's a comprehensive CRM software which has been created by the Salesforce. There is no doubt on that. There's no control on the architecture. There's no control on the infrastructure. There is no control on the ownership. An Indian customer, for example, I get the subscription of the Salesforce for my business for whatever reports I want to create. I have to put in my numbers there. I cannot tell Salesforce that this is not the right way of doing this, or this is the right way of doing this, or this is not the right way of doing that, and vice versa. Even the Salesforce cannot tell me anything about it. So this is where the control comes into picture, that I am left with no choice. It is just that I am getting the subscription of the Salesforce to get the report according to the data which I am putting in. So there is no control on the back-end working of the Salesforce CRM portal. So that's where the control is coming here. If you are able to upload the data on the YouTube, for example, you make a video and you upload it on the YouTube and it is available to everyone, for example, it cannot be said to have that, it cannot be said to have that that you control the video uploading mechanism of the YouTube. You cannot, because you have been allowed, you have been granted an access to upload by the YouTube. You have not created, or you cannot control. If you have not created anything, you cannot control anything, right? So this is where the answer to your query on control is there from side. And another question is, I would come to that equipment thing. Usually, what would be the rate of Salesforce case if EL? Acha, Prakash sir has happened. What would be the fate or rate?
Fate here. If the equalization levy right now is applicable, whether the outcome of this case will be the same or it could have been different.
See, EL 2.0 is applicable, and it's already by Finance Act. The widen has already been, it has been widened. So certainly it can fall under the EL, because the concept of the EL was to actually, tax these kinds of transactions only, which gets immunity because of the absence of the PE, or they cannot not able to fall under the royalty or FTS. That is why there's a change in the budget which came in, which was the payment which could be characterized as royalty. EL 2.0 would not be applicable to them, and if it is not under the royalty, certainly it can go under the ambit of the EL 2.0 if it furnishes the requirements, it furnishes the conditions laid down in section 165A of the Indian Income Tax Act. Right, I will come to the question of the use or right to use any commercial or scientific equipment. So basically, see, equipment in this case is the entire technologically driven methodology, which is actually making your CRM software, live for the customers, so that it can enable your customers to derive the reports out of it. If you want to go more into the scientific equipments, then I would say there are variety of case laws wherein there are actually, there are actually names of the equipments which are mentioned in the case laws, which states that these are the scientific equipments, these are the commercial equipments, and these are the industrial equipments. For example, I remember there is a case law wherein medical equipments, just like thermometers or other complicated medical devices, they are treated as scientific equipments in that case law. I'm sorry, I'm not able to recall the name. I read it long time back somewhere. So it depends on case to case and facts to facts. I think the control can be viewed. Another question from the Vijayji is, I think control can be viewed in different ways. Here the control is that I'm able to work in that part license without anyone else having a right to deny me that access and use during the license period. See, again, you are using a service. You are confusing it with the control part. Control is somewhere that, you're influencing the system's algorithms. It is, you are just using a service which is given to you by the Salesforce. That's it, as per my understanding. If any other panelists would like to add to this, I'd be happy to hear that. But as per my understanding, you cannot confuse the grant of access to the control thing.
No. I think is not confusing. He's just putting up some queries for the benefit of all the participants. Yeah. But you have hit the nail right on the head.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The example of uploading on YouTube was very perfect. Very perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.